Wem.
And I'm Lewis.
This is the Forest School Podcast.
Let's go! Some people have cool like podcasting setups, like studios and chairs and stuff. And we have blankets and
sofas and lots of balancing I'm going for.
You're going to be alright?
I'll try that.
Okay.
See how that goes. How are you? Anything to say to the listeners at this point, Lewis? This is now the slot for public information.
Public information is, if you are not a rural person, it's muck spreading time.
Oh, yes.
So all of the roads are full of
Poop
wagons.
poop.
Yeah, and all of the fields and all of the... Do you know what else it is? And I've been trying to work out what this is going on in my own head.
What, muck spreading in your own head?
Yeah. There's a lot of shit in there.
All the time. Every damn day.
Do you know what? That's what I'm going to call it now. You know that bit before you go to sleep where your brain just comes up with like bad ideas? Just go, I'm just doing a bit of mental muck spreading. I'm just smearing shit over everything.
You know that thing that you really enjoyed today? Actually, maybe it was really bad for you. You know that thing you said to that person that you thought was really funny? Actually, it was really offensive. And they've marked it forever against you.
I was going to say, this is the time of year when if you're looking at like the outside, people have got the bug of like, right, get planting, get fixing, get doing whatever else. But the foliage hasn't caught up enough to hide the piles of construction mess or like the fact that the hedges have been smashed with what's the thing that
flail.
A flail, and it all looks like it's never going to come back. It looks like the end of The Lion King. When not the end of The Lion King, the bit where it's like
where Scar's been in charge.
And I just have been going, why do I feel a bit rubbish when I'm looking around? It's like, because I have this urge to like build and yes, next year and like I'm an animal. I want to make my nest and I shall improve this year, and it all looks like
bum
and sticks. You know, a bare stick is not attractive.
We found our new tagline for our business: "Children of the Forest, bum and sticks."
Wow.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that.
It's a hard time.
I went to some other woods in a different place this week because it's been half term. I went to, I guess you would call it the Chilterns, I think, Buckinghamshire.
Okay.
And there's some like ancient woodland there, and went for loads of walks in lots of different bits. And it was all very lovely, but yeah, bum and sticks. This will be beautiful at some point. At the moment, it's interesting, but it is just bum and sticks. Including one woodland where there was a plaque about like Polish prisoners of war ended up living in the woods with their families. So whether they were like freed from a camp in Poland, but they were actually Italian, and then they were allowed to live like in this woodland. It's really
in Buckinghamshire.
Yeah, really, really interesting. It's like, you know, and here's Forest School in a different way. Yeah. These people just lived it with nothing. Yeah, interesting. I suppose we better talk about something. Yeah,
so
that's a thing.
We've had salty snacks and sugary snacks from our Patreon.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what we took some of the money and bought some snacks. I've bought Rocky Roads and. Now, what are they called? They're called like salt and pepper.
Habanas fritas, I think they're called.
Well, say it again without me talking over you.
Habanas fritas.
Okay.
Deep fried broad beans. Delicious. I mean, that is instead of lunch, by the way.
Yeah.
Just in case anyone's going, well, you know, what am I paying for? Salty snacks and heart disease. Like, you know, look, eat some healthy food.
You're 2 minutes in and you've already had bum and sticks. What do you want? This is what you... You don't want to support more bum and sticks chat. I don't know why you're here.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for bringing those snacks because it's good.
Thank you, Patreon people. I bought a puppet this morning.
Tell me about the puppet.
It is 70 centimetres. It was almost as tall as my daughter. She carried it home. It's a fairy. It's one of the, I don't say it's a good one. It's the Puppet Company one. Yeah, it's a fairy wing thing. It's got curly yellow hair. Because I was listening to the book that we're going to talk. Well, we're talking about different books.
Same author.
15-minute parenting. What age group is your year?
Mine's 0 to 7.
And mine's 8 to 12.
Have you got you've got the book in front of you?
By Joanna Fortune.
Yes. So I looked it up, and she used to do a podcast.
Oh, wow.
Which was all about 15 minutes long.
Cool.
But stopped a couple of years ago. So, yeah, interesting. But yeah, there was puppets mentioned in that book. And I just kind of remembered. And it was talking about social play. And I think that if you're somebody who's got, like, hyperfocus, or you want to, like, write a book, I genuinely think there is a book to be written called, like, Parenting Post-Pandemic. And, like, really looking at gap filling and what can we be doing. And, like, I was talking to some parents the other day and just going, like, it does take some effort, because your monkey brain wants to be like, bad time is done. Bad time is done now.
Oh, fine now.
Now fine. Not fine, because the rest of the UK is crumbling. But, now fine. Not pandemic time now. But to keep going, like, right, but there will be gaps that need filling. Or that's like a deficit model. I don't like that. There will be opportunities that have been missed, that we can support, that we can look back through. And puppets jumped out as me. The socialising, the talking through of stuff, the theory of mind, that being able to take on different roles and talk to them. What does is it the Sally Ann test? Do you know this thing?
Yes.
It's like, they tell you the story of, like, one kid goes out of the room and the other one hides it behind a chair. When the first kid comes back in, where will they look? And the theory of mind test is if a child answers, like, they'll look behind the chair, then you've shown that you don't understand and that person doesn't know where it is. All those things. But
that's a bit, like, controversial now, because they used it. Yeah, because it's often used in talking about autism tests, and it's often used as the evidence that autistic people lack empathy, which is clearly bullshit.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So, and there is a kind of model of, like, well, your kid's autistic, so we're going to give them social skills lessons based on this theory of mind, because all autistic people just have no theory of mind and they cannot possibly imagine what anyone else is feeling, and that's what their problem is, which is just proven to be absolute rubbish. So, yeah, I know about controversy around that.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah. But you're not talking about it from that point of view. No, is it mentioned in the book, or is it...
No, that wasn't mentioned in the book. That was me pulling a thing.
Talking about what theory of mind is, yeah.
Yeah, theory of mind. I would say I really enjoyed my book. I got a bit stuck in a few places, and I had to come and talk to you and go, are you enjoying your book? Because I'm struggling with mine, or this has touched a nerve. Mine's quite interesting because it's 0 to 7. So I went on a bit of a journey with this. So it's 0 to 7, but there's a lot of attachment theory in mine. And a lot of it explained to, not fully in depth, right? This isn't like deep child development, but enough that a parent reading a 200 to 300 page book is going to go, oh, I've learned about attachment theory.
Yeah.
Which is good. There's definitely a place for that, right? I was thinking, like, oh, this is quite interesting because it's very heavily weighted to, I would say, 0 to 3. Like all that early years stuff, talking about, like, the different attachment phases and working up to what your 18-month-old should be able to do and all this. And then actually I reflected back on it and I was going, well, there was a few mentions of, your 18-month-old should be able to be okay with you not being in the room all the time or something like that. But for the most part, there isn't ages referenced. And I was like, I've made the mistake here in thinking in terms of, this is talking about attachment, this is talking about social stuff, and I've gone, this is for under 3s. But actually, a bit like the old early years curriculum used to be in this country, where there were these big, wide, punched a lamp. these big wide bands of like, if they do this any time before they're
Yeah.
5, it's fine. This book is a bit like that. Like 0 to 7 is a big developmental phase.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised it's that wider book. Like I
Well, that's
felt
what I
maybe
mean, I
it
was
needed to be like a
surprised.
0 to 3 and then a 4 to 7. Yeah, interesting.
But then I was reflecting on like, so I was reflecting on how I was looking at it, and I also looked up a lot of reviews about this book, like what were other people saying about it, and lots of them were saying about how non-judgmental was mentioned a lot, which I definitely get. This is a non-judgmental book. There's lots of like, this is what you maybe want to aim for, but it's okay if you just need to get them out of the shop sometimes.
Yeah.
It's okay if you have run out of steam, or you just chalk this one up as, you know, it's very non-judgmental. Realistic was another word I kept seeing. You know, this isn't a high-minded, you know, hypothetical spherical cows in a vacuum type thing.
Yeah.
This is like
Real.
This is real.
Yeah, and mine was the same, and you really got the sense that she did work with families, and you know, as she's writing this book, she's like a clinical psychotherapist and attachment specialist, and has a parent-child relationship clinic in Dublin. So I don't know if yours was the same, but mine was sort of interspersed with little real life stories about families that she's worked with and issues that they've faced and things like that. So I would agree that she's got a very down to earth kind of tone and very personable nature. And I listened to mine on Audible as well as, and then I bought the book as well because I thought actually there's some little kind of actionable ideas in there that I would like to just be able to go back to and find in the book. But I was also reading it thinking, is this helpful even for somebody who either doesn't have children or is thinking about working with children of this age in a professional capacity? And I don't know about you, but I think it was really useful. There were sections which were very much about parenting and your relationship with your child. And then there were other bits which were about kind of child development and important issues for children at this age, which I thought were really relevant to anyone working with children of between 8 and 12. And as somebody who does work with kids, I think there is so much literature about the early stages of child development. So you're reading about babies. If you're working with that younger age group, like you need to be really hot on child development, and you need to know. And you, as you say, you've got that curriculum that's got those bands. Whereas working with older children, if you're teaching or whatever, you will be thinking a lot about like their academic potential and output at that age, but you won't necessarily be thinking in depth about, well, actually what is happening to their brain at this time and what is happening to their relationships. And
there is a third one.
Yes.
There's a third book that's the teenage years.
Yeah.
Which I'd be interested to see.
Definitely. So I really, really enjoyed all that stuff about like what is happening in their brain at this time. So she talks, for example, about synaptic pruning, which I knew about, but thought that happened much later. I didn't realise it started so young. So that's the idea that your brain obviously has all these like neural pathways and all the stuff that it's learned up until that point. And it's just like exponentially growing and all the neural pathways increasing. And then I thought in the teenage years, but she's saying at an earlier age, that it starts actually cutting back a lot of those connections and those things to kind of make space for new stuff. I'll try and find where she actually introduces it. But the middle childhood years are a time for significant growth and development across cognitive, social, emotional, and especially physical faculties. So I guess in the teenage years, maybe that's slightly different and slightly less focused on physical. I don't know. Your child's brain is evolving and becoming more refined. It does this through a process called synaptic pruning, which simply put means your child's brain is cutting back on extra synapses to ensure more efficient brain functioning. This allows for more complex information to be taken in and processed as our brains continue to mature into adulthood. And so she talks about that being really important, but a really sensitive stage. So you've got like all of the environmental issues going on that's going to affect a child's brain, as well as the kind of other stuff that's going on, and their brain being in a constant state of flux. She's talking about. So I guess that's the case for all throughout childhood, isn't it? The brain is always changing, but she's talking about specifically the things that are happening in this age group and what challenges that might bring for not just parenting, but I think, just being with children of that age and helping them to grow. So I would definitely recommend it to anyone who's working with this age group.
8 to 12 is an interesting age group, isn't it? Because I think there's obviously a lot of stuff, like you say, a lot of stuff written about early years and like primary, and there's a lot of stuff written about how to build relationship with your teenager,
Yep.
your young adult, all this stuff. But like 8 to 12 is a really interesting and I would say relatively unexplored age, from my experience at least. It's like primary is getting them through here, and then coast for a bit, and then they'll be teenagers. But
that's the tricky bit. Once
this kicks in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so her sort of model in this book anyway is talking a lot about therapeutic parenting and connecting through play. So throughout the book there's lots and lots of little examples of things you can play and why that type of play is important. And obviously from 8 to 12 this is a time where they're going to slightly be moving away from imaginative play in some cases, especially with you. So they might be off with their friends doing that. But in terms of being at home, where you might have been with your younger child playing with like small world stuff together, or doing role play together, or in the shop or whatever, the imaginary shop, that they might begin to think that's kind of babyish and not want to do that with you. So there's a risk then that we as adults stop kind of playing with them and go, okay, cool, you're sort of happy doing that thing independently now. But she gets sort of sprinkling in little ideas that you wouldn't maybe necessarily think of as play. So for an example, she talks about nurture play and gives an example of doing like manicures and pedicures for each other, or like foot massages and things like that. And that being a type of nurture play. And it's like, actually, that is really, really nice. And I read that and then tried it out with my son. And it was lovely. Like, and, you know, and she says they might go like, this is weird. And obviously you don't pressure them into doing it if they don't want to do it. But you just go, oh, I'll just like rub your feet if you want. And it's just that moment of like, proprioceptive input, nurturing, and all the layers that are kind of giving the message that, you know, you deserve to be treated nicely and looked after, and I'm still here to do that for you, and you deserve that in your life beyond your time with me, and all those kind of messages that you're giving with them that says, I can choose to spend my time how I want, so can you. We're kind of more independent from each other than we used to be. It's not like you have to have a bath now and I'm going to help you have a bath, which you might do with a little child, and they might be getting that input from you, helping to wash their hair in the way that they prefer, or those kind of things. Sort of just reminding you to keep those avenues open. I thought that was really nice, and it has made me think of stuff like that work-wise as well, and going, you know, in the same way, we might not be thinking about so much sensory play, for example, with kids of this age. But I think, well, they know how to access that. You know, we've given them those opportunities when they're younger. The opportunities are still there, and they'll do it if they want, which is true. But also we can, like, for example, in our opening circle or a game that we play all together, begin to throw in some games that are more sensory based. And so we did that thing with standing in a circle and facing the person in front of you, facing their back, and then drawing a message with your finger or a shape and things like that. So it's like a challenge, you know, what is the shape, get it, but it's also a sensory thing, and it's connecting, and it is nurturing, and you're giving someone a nice tactile feeling if they like that kind of thing, obviously. So it's prompted lots of little thoughts of going, I can be offering these other opportunities in work and at home. Did yours have, apart from, so you bought this puppet, has yours had any effect on sort of provision that you're making, or?
Thanks to everybody that's rating and reviewing the podcast on Spotify and on iTunes. It really helps to get the podcast in front of more people and helps us spread the word about the amazing thing that is Forest School.
I would say no, not significantly, but that is because my own children are in this age group, and this is the age group that I trained in, and this is the age group that we predominantly work in. I don't feel like I didn't take away any huge, like, oh my God, this is amazing, this has changed my view of this, or this has changed my view of this. It was a lot more of like, this is a very digestible way to talk about, you know, like, there was a bit in mine that was like a chapter or so that was like, what if you don't like playing? What if you just don't like playing?
Oh, right, as an adult.
As an adult.
Yeah. That's good that she's acknowledged that.
Again, acknowledging it. That's okay. That's absolutely fine. And again, this person, they're talking about this work that they do with families and saying that is sometimes the work that needs to be done, and going, you just might not like feeling like this. You might, the sensory thing. So get a washing up bucket and do it in there. Or you might feel like you can't do that in your house. So go find a community space where you can do that thing. Or one bit that I thought was really interesting was like, try and unpick what it is about fantasy role playing that you don't like, if that isn't what you like. Is it that you feel silly? Is it that you don't like being in a space where anything is possible? Because actually that's when anything is possible, you don't know, and then you don't know where to go in that like low arousal kind of way. So it was an interesting thing to have that acknowledged in the same way that we would talk about it as like our role as play workers or our role as forest school leaders, and go, that's okay to acknowledge that. As part of our level 3, we do bits of that and talk about with people like, hey, what kind of play do you like or don't you like? And what, why is that?
We actually had a parent, I remember, who joined forest school with her toddler and said that that's why she joined forest school, because she knew that her child really enjoyed like messy, dirty play, but she couldn't do it because couldn't facilitate that herself at home. So it's like, that's why I'm doing forest school, not because I really actually want to be here. It's that I know my child needs that, and I need some assistance to facilitate that, and a location where that's okay, because I'm not bringing messy stuff into my house. I just can't bear it, which is completely fair enough. And how like brave of that parent to acknowledge that and say that to us, rather than this is all great, isn't it?
Okay with everything. I don't mind, I'm fine. So I think I would recommend this book as a like introduction to this kind of way of gentle parenting, attachment parenting, all those things. There were some interesting bits about there were some bits that I found a bit icky. So one of them was using puppets to reenact, and the way she described it is reenact like explicitly difficult scenarios that are happening or have happened. And I just can't sit with that. Like that doesn't chime with me, to be like, hey, you're having problems sharing with your brother all the time. Let's sit down and do puppets. And the puppets go, hey, I want the toy. Hey, I want the toy. What do you think the puppets should do? Like, it's twee and I hate it.
Yes, and I know what you mean. And
I see that, just to defend myself, I see the value in it.
And I was just going to interrupt that to say that we have done it together.
Oh shit.
Yeah, but we did it in a way that obviously we didn't hate. Otherwise, we wouldn't have done it. But it was when we ran the kindergarten, and we had. Do you remember we used to use like puppets just made out of blocks of wood?
Oh yeah.
And we did a puppet show. And we did, because there was like an issue coming up. I don't think it was sharing. It was like a social story that we acted out. And then we were like, if they don't pick up on this, that's completely fine. And really, this might be a springboard that leads them to make puppets. Or it might be nothing. It might just be that they listen to the story and then they go off and do something else. But I do remember that we decided, like, rather than, hey guys, we've noticed that there's this issue going on,
That's what I mean. I see the value in it. I think it was, and credits to this book, it was like, just let them finish the story, and if they finish it in the same way that they finish it when they are in that scenario, don't acknowledge it, don't say anything else. You just go, this is fine. This is okay. Is that the end of the story? And let that be the end.
Don't get it preachy.
Don't get it preachy. Don't get whatever else. One thing I did find interesting in mine was they were talking about children 3 to 5 being in the developmental world of magic, which I found really interesting. This was very brief, but they were talking about how at that developmental stage, they genuinely believe if they wish for things, they will come true, positively and negatively. So this was the thing for me. I understand and I have seen this thing of, like, I really wish I can get a bike for my birthday.
I'm still in that phase now.
Okay, great. Okay, but I don't think you're in the other one, which is, so they're going like, and then you go, what do you think you might get for your birthday? I'm getting a bike for my birthday because I've wished for it.
Yeah.
Right, that level. they were saying also children genuinely believe that they can cause harm to others if they go, I wish my sister had never been born. I wish my parents would not exist. Like they believe that they can have that effect on the world through wishful thinking.
Wow.
But then that can spiral in a self-worth. Oh my God, I'm the reason that the baby got hurt.
Yeah.
I'm the thing. I wished it. And so so it was like a kind of acknowledgement of like that can be going on for some people.
That's so interesting, isn't it? That egocentrism of like a child, which is a thing throughout childhood, but that I guess it maybe has like peaks and troughs of how important it is in brain development. But the fact that, you know, you are the center of the universe and you are so powerful and everything revolves around you and that's how you grow up. That's so interesting. And that is definitely something to be aware of if you're working with children, isn't it? In terms of, cutting them some slack in terms of what your expectations of them are, because you just have to remember the world revolves around them. Like, that is just normal. They are not being selfish, pig-headed, a bit thick right now with and understanding those. You know, there's a reason for it, but also potentially watching for that. If it's, you know, if you see someone that seems to be in a bit of a negative spiral, having the awareness that actually that's because of how their brain works right now, really believes beyond the real that they can be responsible for things.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
That little nugget dropped.
Yeah.
There was also a bit where they were talking about, so this person runs sessions and they were talking about with families, and they were talking about all these little signals that we give, that we are signalling to the children that we are here to play. That this is the, you know, so the whole premise of this book is like, if you can only do 15 minutes a day, do 15 minutes a day. If you can only do it 15 minutes a week, and this was quite interesting, they were saying, do 15 minutes a week, don't do half an hour every day for 4 days, then knock it on the head and don't do it for 3 months, then do, you know, set a realistic time and stick to it and be and they were talking about a dad that was coming to these sessions, and they were doing some messy play, and he was coming straight from work, and she said, you would not believe how this suit looked in the after we've done this sensory goo, slime, whatever it was. But she said the following week he arrived with a bag with a tracksuit in it, and then the kid started to call it his play clothes.
Aww.
And then he knew that dad was putting on his play clothes. That's so cute. Which is great in terms of just like, you and I've had little things like that, like story hats, or like I'm wearing we've got a big dressing up box in the woods, and I will sometimes put on a high-vis jacket and a builder's helmet that it sits on the top of my head because it's so small. If we're like den building, or if we're doing, just signalling like, I'm a den builder right now, I'm doing this thing, everybody watch out, site manager, all this thing. Those little signals.
That's so interesting.
That can be like, hey, I'm playing and I'm here to play.
Yeah. I did the same. I dressed up as one of the...
You dress up all the time.
Do I?
Yeah, constantly.
Oh, that Pokemon battle. We had a Pokemon battle. I was Team Rocket.
We didn't.
We, kids.
Oh, the kids did.
Yeah, Team Rocket. But you've made me think about the story hat now, because I brought out my story hat for the first time in ages the other day, and one kid hadn't seen it, and then another kid went, what's that? And the other went, oh, she wears it when she tells a story. And I've always thought of, and then the other child said, why? And I didn't really have an answer right then, because I'd always sort of thought of it as like, it helps me.
It's a social crutch for me.
Yeah, I've always thought of it as helping me in terms of like, this is what I'm doing now. I am focusing on this, and that's what I'm doing. But actually, in terms of it being a signal to the children that I'm probably going to behave differently now, and I might not respond to you in the same way as I might if I wasn't telling a story right now, or maybe you're not listening to the story, you're playing over there and you need some scissors, but you can see from a distance that I've got my story hat on, so you may have to wait longer for the scissors. Do you know what I mean? It being useful as well in that regard, obviously, which isn't the same as a play cue, but...
yeah, I think there's two sides to this coin, and I think you've just really highlighted for me. So I was taught that in the classroom, you can sometimes have a hat or a lanyard or a thing. I have seen teachers don't like this. I have seen teachers that have a lanyard with a laminated stop sign on it, and if they're like doing guided reading with a group, and you have another child come up to you, that they don't break sentence, they just, I'm miming it now, hold up the lanyard to the person that's come to ask them something with a stop sign, or it says, you know, like, I am doing guided reading right now, and holding it up as a, like, if I was being really negative, as a shutdown, as a, like, and that's similar to what you're describing there, not in a, you're not saying it in the same tone, but the side of that coin that is like, I'm not available. But actually, what I think this is looking at it from the other perspective and going, I am super available.
Yeah.
So like, and it may well be the same thing, that if I'm dressed up as a builder and somebody wants a pair of scissors, they're going, well, he's not available. But actually my motivation there is to go, people who are den building, I'm just with you, and I'm not leaving for a minute. I'm doing this stuff. Whereas like, sometimes we have days like this, and they're not very fulfilling, where you flip from thing to thing to thing to thing. As a leader, you never really get to get deep in anything, because you're going, I just need to go check on there. You just helicopter for an hour or two. You're just going like, yeah, they're all right. Okay, I'll go see them. Oh yeah, I will be a chaser. Just give me 2 minutes, because I'm half watching these guys as well. Oh, I'm just doing like, and it kind of refreshed that thing for me of like, should be modelling and pole bridging a bit of like, I'm actually dedicated to this play right now in a positive way.
But sometimes they genuinely don't want you to. So that is your role.
What do you mean?
The kids.
Oh yeah, but
do you know what I mean?
If the time is right, and if you are, because sometimes, and we've had this where someone's like, I need someone to stay here and build dens with me, or I need to, and the rest of the group can't fulfill that play need for me right now, and so it's just like an extra layer of like, you're committing to that. You're committing to play. How do you show the kids that you're committing to play in this moment? And I think that's interesting, something I want to reflect on a bit more as we go on. Like, okay, what other little cues are we sending? How is this play space set up to, you know, facilitate that? And how do we, if we've got family groups or parent-toddler groups or groups where it's not just us as the adults, how do we get, you know, how do we model that for other adults to go, hey, I'm going to put this on so everyone, you know. I find that interesting.
Never go back to mundane marshmallows ever again. Forest School Cooking, the cookbook, covers everything from how to build and use different types of outdoor ovens, stoves and equipment, right through to a range of different meals to keep anyone full and ready for the next adventure. Get your copy today on Amazon.
You know, I said this book is kind of sprinkled through with like little, like, brain sparks of, oh, we could do this type of play. Another thing that it's just leaping out to me now is about activities that embody rhythm and synchrony. And so she's saying, the author's saying that these kind of games and activities activate those subsystems of the developing brain associated with emotional regulation. Did you know that? So rhythm and synchrony, and doing a lot of that, help with emotional regulation, she's saying. And that they're very...
I sing all the time when I'm out of sorts.
And so she's saying that they're really effective at repairing a ruptured connection in a relationship. And she keeps on saying that between 8 and...
Sorry.
What?
Because you've described a ruptured relationship, I'm imagining having a falling out with someone and then going on to them and going, what's your fucking problem? Why in the fucking mood? What's your fucking problem?
Exactly. Or just getting some drumsticks and just beating them on the back with the drumsticks. This is make you feel better.
Rhythmically.
So she's talking a lot about mood swings in the 8 to 12-year-old group, and just being ready for that, and just like strap in, because there's going to be some extreme stuff going down, which as a parent of 2 children in this age group I can attest to. What does she give some examples of games, like, again, saying things like, your kid might think this is babyish, so if they do, like, don't worry, but you know, you can kind of try it. So like clapping games, and again, lots of like touching each other sounds dodgy, but you know what I mean.
Positive physical contact.
Positive physical contact. And she's got a YouTube channel as well, where she kind of mentions games that you might have played as a kid, but if you've forgotten, you can go on her YouTube channel and look it up, and she'll remind you of the words of the particular clapping game and things like that. Yeah. So that made me think of things that we can do in the woods that are rhythmical games. So still really physical, but not necessarily like big physical, but small physical.
Yeah. One of the things that was in my book, there's a lot of stuff in mine. I guess because mine's earlier, they make a really interesting comparison. Or not comparison, what's the opposite? Like differentiation between child-led play and adult-led play. And there being a space for both. And that... there's a lot of talk about sand timers in here, which I don't like.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
It's not in a horrible way. It's in a like, hey, I'm going to turn the sand timer. I am playing with you for 15 minutes when this runs out. Or they say doing it so that you go, we've got a 5-minute one and we're going to do it 3 times, or we're going to do it. Look, for me, I've worked with more people I know that would find that anxiety inducing than I think would find it comfortable. That's just my experience. You know.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, anyway. But they talk about your 15 minutes of playtime with your kid not being a time to discuss their behaviour at other times of the day, not being a time to unpick big social things, which I think is quite interesting, because I feel like sometimes once this was going as a routine, I think it would be so easy to fall into like, oh, once I'm playing Lego, while they're playing Lego and we're doing stuff with our, in that positive way, while we're doing stuff with our hands, why don't we talk about what's going on at school? Why don't we talk about how they're doing with their thing? And then this person kind of points out that like, then the association becomes, hey, it's our 15 minutes of like therapy, which is obviously very different and not the same as I am here to facilitate your play, or I am here to suggest these things. So it's like, again, that thing of what we do in our longer sessions. And again, I think this is why it is a good thing that Forest School has this kind of like longer sessions, right? That why can't you do 20-minute Forest School sessions? Because that forces you to overlap things. Whereas having a longer Forest School session is one of the main reasons that we can go, there's some play here, there's some chatting about social and emotional stuff here, there's some this stuff here, but we're not, like children's, in quotes, playtime is already being hammered from 8,000 directions. And if you then go, oh, this is your playtime, but actually I'm going to dictate the conversation and make it about this thing. One of the things I really like about Forest School is that long stretch, and, long stretches with, I don't want to say very little planned, but very like well-paced, I'm going to say. Well-paced planning means that you can do things discreetly and go, this is completely free play. Yeah. This is where we're going to have that chat, but this is...
Yeah. And it's much more honest and open, isn't it? It's like that whole thing of, I'm going to play this game with you because we will connect and it'll make you relax. And so then I can use that time to... Yeah, it's kind of that sort of like... Obviously, there's people whose job it is like, this author talks about sessions that she has one-to-one with children where she like builds a relationship through play, and then she gets to the point where they're able to talk about the reason that the child is with her in the first place.
But that's those sessions.
That's those sessions, exactly. Yeah. And it's quite manipulative, isn't it, to get somebody into that state of almost like vulnerability because they're very connected to you because they're playing with you, and then go, well, we're here. Yeah. Can you stop chucking stuff at people? Or whatever. Yeah, that's interesting.
I just found that as a really interesting, because I was trying to think about, could you literally map this onto Forest School 15 minutes with each person? And I don't think you could, right? Because I don't think it would become very formulaic. It would become very I can play whatever I want, but then at 2 I've got to go and do 15 minutes with Lewis.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like, oh, I've got an appointment to play with, whereas free-flowing it. But that's us. You know, that's why I don't think you could map it on. But I think if you had this stuff, some of this in my book, they talk about having like a car pack of stuff, like finger puppets and some a tiny bit of like hand lotion for sensory games, and a balloon and a something else, and going, that all fits inside a Ziploc bag that is A4 size, and you can keep it, you know, infinite and positive, and they're a bit anti-screen time, which I get, right? I get it. But having those up your sleeves to then weave into a free-flow forest school session would then be useful to go, hey, I'm picking you up here with some...
Yeah.
Then, you know.
I think that thing of increasing your offer of back pocket things, whether that be games, activities, or ways of framing things, is really useful. There's bits, I don't know if there's much in your book about like friendships and relationships.
Not so much, because it's younger.
Younger, yeah. So the approach that she's sort of advocating does tie in, I think, quite well with Forest School in terms of... So she talks about risk a lot, which I'll come back to. Talks about watching children forming relationships and friendships with people, and about your approach to that and your response to that. So she really strongly says, do not get involved. Like, you have to just watch your kids make their own friendships and deal with their own friendships, and you only... help them either when they ask you explicitly to, or you see that actually this is a friendship that is really becoming quite toxic on one side or the other, that then you can, and even then the way that you step in is in a way that is kind of asking questions and helping your child to reflect on it themselves, rather than stepping in and going, I forbid you to do this, or you must not say that.
You'll never see that boy again.
Exactly. So she's saying that they are able to kind of formulate more complex thoughts, and they're able to understand other people's feelings in a more advanced way than they were when they were younger, but they also can't necessarily put two sides of the same story together. So they're still quite egocentric, and they've got this like, I did this great thing for this person, therefore they should feel blah, or therefore they should give me the same thing. That some children might still be in that place where actually they don't necessarily have a complex understanding of other people's possible responses to their actions, and that is often a source of confusion. And you can sometimes see that play out, I think, when children are playing, that, you know, that sense of justice, that sense of like, but, you know, I didn't steal the things from the den when I was near there, but then they did it to me, or like those kind of, do you know what I mean? Those kind of like, I had an expectation that their behaviour would be the same as mine because I made that choice, or I had an expectation that their response to my behaviour would be gratitude, or, you know.
Do you think that is, or does your book talk about whether that is innate or learned? Because I'll elaborate. Because as you were describing that, I think I have heard that taught. I think I have heard that taught in terms of, I've heard a lot of adults, and maybe this is why I've like had we talk a lot about like developing intrinsic motivation, you know, like sharing something because you see that it makes someone else happy, or you know, things like that, where you're like, you don't focus on what you're going to get back, either from an external thing, like an adult will give me a sticker if I share, or an adult will give me a sticker if I, in air quotes, play nice. But I have heard a lot of adults say, that thing of like, you need to share with them because they gave you they've shared their crisps, so now you need to share your thing, or they waited while you did the thing, so now you need to wait. Do you know what I mean? That like golden rule of like, treat us as you would like to be treated, but it's not quite. That's the rule as said, but then what's actually inferred or taught is like, treat others so they will treat you like you want to be treated.
It's interesting that, isn't it? I don't know. No, I'm just looking at the bit where she's talking about this. I've
waffled, but do you kind of...
I do know what you mean, and I was talking to some one the other day about this, about how we don't lead like that ever. I don't anyway, in terms of, you know, that treat other people the way you'd like to be treated. I may have said that before, like, you know, when my first kid was very young, but before I did forest school, but I definitely haven't said or thought along that way. And I think it comes from working with kids in a different situation and reading a lot and having that underlying understanding that kids will do well when they can.
Yeah.
They just do. Like, you don't need to teach them that. I believe that all humans are born with that potential, kind of almost flame of goodness inside them, and that we are driven by, you know, so to be pro-social, I guess, is what we're talking about, pro-social behaviour. And whether you can, well, we've done a whole podcast about this, haven't we? Can you teach pro-social behaviour? We've talked about, you know, socialised versus, so, you know, all of that shemizzle. But what I guess I'm trying to say is that when we lead, we will make observations to help children to reflect, like, we don't go, give the scissors to so-and-so because you finish with them now and it's their turn, or do that because it will make them feel happy. We do go, I noticed you gave the thing. I noticed that someone looked really happy when you did that. Or, do you know what I mean? We might make observations and reflections, but we won't give instructions about how to behave pro-socially. And I think what we're doing is promoting children's awareness of needs of others compared to their own needs. I think that's what we're doing. I think that's our aim. I feel like it is anyway.
Definitely.
Do you know what I mean? Is to try to explain to children and get them to be aware that everyone does well when they can, and that if somebody isn't behaving pro-socially or in a way that they expect right now, because we definitely have conversations of children being like, the expectation that I had is different to reality. Yeah, exactly.
It back.
Yeah, I said sorry. Why are they? That wasn't upsetting. Why are they upset?
Yeah.
It wasn't even scary.
I wouldn't care.
Yeah,
I wouldn't care if you took my things.
Which is what this author is talking about right now. It's like that, and that we are creating an environment where we are helping children, supporting children to recognise that other people's needs are different from their own at different times.
Yeah.
And that's not to dismiss their own needs, not to go, well, you know, I know that you actually really need a calm environment right now, but that child needs to kick off, so deal with it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that. I'm saying having an awareness of both simultaneously so that they can hold both those things with care. But
that's complex.
Yeah.
It's really complex to, you know.
But I think, I was talking to someone about education and raising children who was not a teacher or a forest leader or anything, and I think we were talking about like competitive stuff and gamification of education.
Okay.
And how everything from day one is like, how many dojo points do you have and where is your name on the chart and all that kind of absolute bollocks. Or how you teach times tables is to use an app that compares children with each other and you can see how many points you have. Yeah. Okay. And I was saying that I think the point of looking after children is the thing that I've just described, which is like the opposite of comparing yourself to other people in terms of, oh, they are not the same as me and they have different needs to me right now, and I have an awareness of that, which helps me to build better relationships, and that you as the adult are furthering that understanding and looking after everybody.
So that's really interesting. So what you're saying is, in this book they're talking about piecing together sides of a story.
Yeah, it's a really brief bit of the story of the book, to be honest. It's she's describing friendships and going, it'll be really difficult for them to figuratively step back and identify patterns in their friendships, good or bad, and they need help with this. But the best way for you to do this is not to jump in and tell them how it is, but rather hold back and gently wonder with them about certain patterns and themes you've observed. For example, David was late today and you were waiting for him. I wonder how that made you feel. I wonder if you often feel like that. If your child dismisses this and says everything was fine and they didn't mind, leave that alone. They will think about it themselves, and a new awareness will be created so they can draw their own conclusions. Maybe the answer is not what what you think. Maybe your child is fine with David being late because they know that David has a sibling with special needs who needs a lot of his parents' time, and he often has to wait for them to be ready to take him somewhere. But by introducing a reflexive question, you are modelling that they can reflect on how things and experiences make them feel. Does that make sense? So it's
Doesn't make sense. I think so.
By middle childhood, your child is showing that they are able to consider multiple perspectives at once. However, they will still struggle to hold two conflicting perspectives in mind at the same time. They will be aware of their own thoughts and feelings and of their friends' thoughts and feelings, but they will not hold that dual awareness at the same time.
Yes, that does make sense. And I guess that is one of the things that working with the age groups that we're working with, that is challenging, moving from that, like we were just talking about, that egocentric, the world revolves around me. If I've wished bad things upon people, that must be why bad things have happened, to theory of mind, to understanding different responses, to understanding, unseen things that may or may not be happening, holding information in your head for a long time. That, we're bridging that understanding gap, and that is hard.
Yeah, and she's talking about like watching your child form friendships with, she gives an example of someone being invited for a play date and the child turns up, and you as a parent with your own set of expectations and probably prejudices or whatever go, really? Like, that person? Are you sure? This person seems very different to you and I don't think you're going to get on. Yeah. But that you just zip it. Like, you have to show your child that you trust them with their own choices and not get involved. But it also gives advice about how to spot when a friendship is beginning to have a negative impact on your child, primarily from the side of your child being at the brunt of, potentially the victim of some harmful kind of behaviour, and helping them to recognise that friend isn't healthy for them right now. So she does kind of give that advice, which I still think is interesting as a kind of childcare provider, to have this awareness of friendships and to, like, we talk about it all the time, don't we, in terms of in our reflections we'll talk about the interactions we've witnessed between people and the patterns that we might see going on.
Public, in the circle. You're not good for you, are you? And you shouldn't play with them because But in terms of being aware of when to step in, I guess, and when to go, is this something that they genuinely can work out themselves? And like that example, actually, I thought they would mind because that would really upset me if somebody kept doing that to me. Or do they genuinely have an understanding? I suppose that's where we're in a slightly different position as a provider, doing it professionally. And similarly, like, again, if I'm thinking about taking these books and going, can I map them onto Forest School one-to-one? No. In this scenario, one of the things that, I don't know, I've not read this book, but one of the things that is difficult is you can choose who you invite round your house. You can reflect on, like, do you want to meet up with that person at the weekend? If you're in a, whatever the education, it doesn't have to be in school, it can be a home ed group, it can be as a, after school club or anything like that. We go, you're not in control of who comes and doesn't come.
No.
And so then you're in this really interesting position where you go, okay, you can't just, like, as an adult, we were saying, I can't remember which podcast it was now, we're talking about, like, when you know that children will be much more happy when they're an adult because they can just go, I don't want to see that person, so I'm not going to see that person.
Yeah.
And, like, in this scenario where you're like, you might be able to have that conversation and reflect and go, that's not great, even if you both achieve that, or not achieve, if you arrive at that understanding. But
but there are always times where, in any setting with other kids, where they can choose to spend more time in closer proximity or more connected to a certain person. And similarly, as adults, there are definitely times where we have to be in close proximity to people that we would really rather avoid, whether that's like, in-laws, friends, partners, all these kind of, or people who also go to a thing that you enjoy doing, So, we do have choice, but there are still times where
we don't.
we don't.
Yeah.
Um,
With your book, so we talked about at the start that these are very like medium depth books in terms of development, theory, understanding. You've already mentioned that you've got that book because it will be actionable or there's things you want to go back to. I wondered, just in the abstract, I feel like, and I saw this in some reviews of my book, people saying, this is a great book, I have to go back to it every 6 months to remind myself, and the phrasing was, what I should be doing, so I don't fall into my old habits, so I don't do whatever. And I'm just interested in that thing of like, where does this book, or where do these books sit in terms of like, at one end of the spectrum you might say there's like super didactic books, like this is how you should play with children, you don't need to understand why, just know that it's good that you do it like this. And at the other end you've probably got something which is more like Alfie Kohn, Peter Gray, where they're super theory based, but they don't give you as many practical like skills to do. You know, they don't give you as many like, here's a 5-minute activity, here's a 10. Do you think this book sits in the middle, and do you, what are the pros and cons of it being in the middle?
I think it's in the middle, and I think that there's a lot to be said for that in terms of it being not too like, oh my god, my brain is exploding with the idea of this theory of childhood or human development. It's just like, here's a general pattern of how children develop at this stage. What it doesn't do is therefore go into any kind of stuff about neurodivergence. That was my beef with it.
Okay.
So it definitely makes generalizations, and then also kind of problem solves little issues that might happen, either that are theoretical, or she gives these real examples of families that she's worked with. And the way that she writes about them, because this is her job, is always in that problem-solving way of like, and therefore, you know, this child had this problem.
Do this and it won't be a problem anymore.
Yeah. And she does say, this is not an overnight fix. Of course, this, you know, she's not thick. Like, it's obviously...
Oh, no, definitely not. This is somebody that understands the work they're doing.
Yeah. And says this might take time, but she doesn't ever go, and maybe you might consider that there's something else going on as well, or...
Applications to complete Level 3 Forest School leader training here with us at Children of the Forest are now open. Train with me and Lewis at our woodland site in Devon. We'd love to meet you in person. Visit myforestschooltraining.co.uk to find out more.
Well, actually, that was one of my stumbling blocks when I think I went to, I don't know if I came to you with this one, but early on, actually I mentioned it, they were talking about object permanence in young children, and you know, that thing of, and being really reassuring and going, this is why your toddler is not okay with just hearing your voice. They have to come to the toilet with you because they can't just hear, you know, like, mummy's just over here, daddy's I'm here, you can hear me. They're like, not good enough, can't see you, don't know you exist, gone. So that was really great and all this stuff. But then it was very strong and said, by 18 months you should have worked up to the point where your child can then spend a 6 to 8 hour day at nursery or preschool without you. And I just took my own experience and went, there was a fucking pandemic. My 3-year-old did not have that opportunity. Look, park it, they probably wouldn't have had it either, because the 5-year-old didn't do any of those things. But there was some stuff like that was quite like, you know, for all the things I've said, where it's like, it's very accepting. Do you know what it is? What? I think, sorry, let's pause.
What?
What? Tell me. It's taken an hour. These books are very non-judgmental towards the parent and not necessarily so non-judgmental towards the children. I would say they're maybe less non-judgmental to, or less achievable, moving goalposts, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's not about judgment, it's about expectation. Like the expectations are
that's
more
a better way.
rigid, maybe.
That's a better way of saying it. Like this book, my book in particular, was super like, hey, if you don't like messy play, that's okay. Hey, if you need to just do 2 minutes of playing a day, that's fine. Just do what you can. If you need to bribe your kids out of the supermarket sometimes, that's absolutely fine. Your kids should be able to leave you at 18 months. Your kids should be able to have a conversation at 3. They should be able to do this. Like you say, in that problem fix way. Which is probably what the audience is for these books.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the title alone is indicating that, isn't it? It's like, this is 15 minutes,
And do you think
approach.
that's something that rubs up against, in terms of grinding, 2 gears that don't quite mesh together, our super inclusive approach to forest school, that I would say I definitely started forest school with this, like, hey, I can gap fill, hey, I can do this thing, hey, if you come here, your kids will be more resilient, they will be, better have nature knowledge. And I've moved further and further to where I just want to be like, they'll come here and we'll support them and we'll give them what they need, and that will be okay. And that's what's important, not being able to go, great, and now they give up less, because they might, but they might not, that grinds up against the way that our forest school operates. Not all forest schools, because some people do use forest school in that, like, gap fill fun, and it can be used like that, as a tool.
I do know what you mean. I think there's enough in this edition anyway that is helpful in terms of being aware of a general pattern of development, which may not apply to every child. But, for example, she's talking about how part of being roughly 8 to 12 is about increased independence and challenging authority and challenging what adults say. And so, for example, you might be, especially in forest school, our long-term stuff is off the wazoo, isn't it? In terms of, like, we've had kids from when they were toddlers to when they're teenagers potentially, and we're going to be in their lives 2 days a week for that huge stretch of time. So we might notice something that is new in our relationship with that child or in their behaviour with other children, and go, like, always being curious and always reflective and going, something's up with so-and-so, because they're really, they really challenged me on that thing. And have I said something? Have I done something? Is something going on? Whereas actually, just to be reminded, this is a perfectly natural part of child development at this age.
Yeah.
I think that those positive bits of information in the book are more helpful than and now your child should be able to do this, and this is a problem that you can fix with this, because I can take that with a pinch of salt, because that's in so much of the rest of the world, isn't it? That we already go, don't believe in that. Nope, no thank you, get to the bin. Exactly. I think you'll find it's not actually that, and if you want to sit still for 20 minutes, I will shout in your face about why it isn't.
So I'm going to go out on a limb. We've sometimes talked about, when we've done parenting books, child development books, whether they are like newly qualified forest school leader, been doing it for a while, or deep into your pedagogy, explore this one. I'm going to put this one slap bang in the newly qualified / might be doing your training. I think I could put this as an early thing. There's nothing too confrontational in it. I don't think it necessarily, because this book is talking about parenting, it sort of sidesteps that issue of being like, and schooling should look like this, right? They're not in any way saying this in the books, which is a nice little step around to bring that in and then go, hey. So I would put it there. Would you?
Yes, I think I'd probably agree. The chapter on risk is very appropriate for newly qualified forest school leaders or people who are thinking of doing it, maybe. So she, especially people who might be a bit sensitive around risk, it's very well written. So she's talking about how, protecting our children is one of our most basic instincts as a parent, if we constantly jump in to rescue them, to do everything for them, how will they ever learn to manage challenges that come their way? And then she pictures a scene of being in a child-friendly swimming pool, and your child is sitting on the side of the pool and refuses to get into the water and is looking to you to help them get in, is saying, I can't get in, I'm scared, lift me in, come get me. You stay where you are and you don't move. And you smile and wave them in towards you. They shake their head. You say, come on in, you can do this, just sit down at the edge and slide yourself in. I'm right here. They shake their head, their lips starts to tremble, their eyes fill with tears. Please come and get me. It's quite extreme. So she's saying, picture this is happening, and what is your emotional response?
Swim away.
You know, and then you reassure them again, you say that, and then 2 whole minutes pass. That's 120 seconds. All you do is stay, look at them, smile, regardless of what your child is saying now. Then your child sits at the edge of the pool, slides in and walks over to where you are still standing. I did it, they beam. So she's like, just reflect on this scenario. How do you personally respond to it? So that's quite interesting. And then she also gives you a risk questionnaire. And I was going to ask you, wasn't there like some kind of audit in yours about something?
Yeah, it's a parenting audit, talking about your own childhood. It actually got quite deep at one point. At one point I was looking at it going, this would be a really interesting like level 3 thing to bring in, to go like, hey, why don't you do an audit of your own play experiences? And then it got quite like, you know, were you ever about, it almost went into like ACEs.
Oh, right.
And I was just like, no, I don't want to do this.
I think this risk audit, some of it, is too personal and you wouldn't put it in a level 3
there's
course.
Some nuggets that we can
There
pull.
are, like, you know, there's some interesting questions like, do you feel strongly motivated by money? Is it difficult for you to send a meal back or make a complaint in a restaurant? If you think something is against the rules, would it stop you doing it? So it's not all about like physical risk.
Yeah.
Does alcohol feature strongly in your social life? Like you wouldn't be asking those, you know. What else? As a child, did you enjoy team sports or meeting new people? Have you ever been arrested? Okay. How do you behave when attending your child's sports activities? Things like that. So, and she doesn't give any kind of feedback. She's not like, if you answered mostly no, nothing. Yeah. It's just, here's a bit like this situation of describing the swimming pool. She's
just not engage with it.
Yeah. How are you feeling? At what point in the scenario did you feel yourself becoming anxious or irritated? What would you have done differently and why? What might be the benefit of playing it out as above? And for those, you know, we know a lot of adults who've trained with us who have, you know, attitude. I mean, everyone, if you talk about risk with children, it's just such a sensitive subject, isn't it? And we have had lots and lots of conversations with trainee forest school leaders and parents about how they recognise that their attitude to risk is not necessarily helpful to the children they're either parenting or they're working with. And they know that it's an area they need to work on. And I think this chapter could be quite supportive in working through some of that. So, for example, you know, this is the fundamental question, isn't it? How do you know if the risk is reasonable and developmentally matched to your child? Ask yourself each time and answer, what is the worst that could happen here? What is the benefit and potential learning from this risk situation? Which is basically RBAs, isn't it? It's the risk-benefit analysis that we do all the time. But asking you to do that time and time again with your kid. And then there's a lot about the benefits of risk-taking behaviour, which, you know, we know, and that's maybe a topic for another podcast. But she also talks about games that can support risk-taking in a really supported way, which, you know, for them and for you. And she talks a lot also about, she's going off the topic slightly, but about collaborative games as opposed to competitive, or you're putting in competition but at the same time as collaboration, which gels quite well with the kind of style that we might do at Forest School, in terms of it's not you versus you, like we're a team and together we're kind of trying to do this thing, and there's another
you just move to a different team,
all of those things,
or you can be unstuck by your
yeah.
I enjoyed reading them. I think I will be getting physical copies of them to offer to level 3s, and also to offer to like my parents and like my partner and things.
Yes.
Can we do, people might not know, we do a sneaky second podcast for people that are patrons. Do you want to do knots?
Oh,
we talk about knot work.
Sure.
It's like we do like a little podcast afterwards, like proper practical activities, advice, stuff like that is on the Patreon feed.
And we kind of came up with this idea because we get a lot of messages from people, and often they are asking quite like practical questions, aren't they? The things, and then you think,
the main pod is so waffly.
Yeah.
And lovely because it's waffly.
Yeah.
but sometimes people want a little dictionary to flick through. Not a dictionary, a Rolodex of how do I do knots? How do I do... so we've already done some little bits of tinkering and some...
shelters.
How to, different shelters you can build. And I'd like to do knot work with children now.
And by the by, if people would like that little extra Patreon-only podcast to have a specific focus, do feel free to message us in and say, because we have got a bit of a, not backlog, but library of questions that we've already been asked that we can address. But if there's something that you're burning to ask and would like some practical
support. How did you do a Pokemon battle in the woods? How do you even do that, guys? We'll tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Nice.
See you in a bit.
Bye.